If you want to understand why your liver is silently accumulating fat right now, don't look at your alcohol consumption. Don't look at your sugar intake. Look at what's missing from your plate every single morning. One overlooked pink vegetable sitting in the produce section of every grocery store for less than $3 can trigger bile flow, flush trapped toxins, and reverse the fatty infiltration strangling your liver's ability to function. And the research behind this isn't folklore. It's peer-reviewed, measurable, and reproducible. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and liver metabolism researcher. And after nearly 15 years watching patients arrive in the emergency department with end-stage liver disease, after seeing people in their 50s and 60s with cirrhosis who never touched alcohol, after reviewing thousands of ultrasounds showing livers that look like foie gras, I've come to understand something that most people never hear from their doctor. Your liver didn't fail overnight. It's been suffocating slowly, one meal at a time, because the drainage system responsible for flushing toxins and metabolizing fat has been clogged for years. Here's a number that should stop you cold. Researchers estimate that between 25 and 30% of adults in developed countries now have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That means 1 in 3 people watching this video right now has a liver infiltrated with fat deposits. And here's what makes this truly alarming. By the time symptoms appear, by the time you feel that dull ache in your upper right abdomen or notice that chronic fatigue that never lifts, your liver has already lost between 30 and 40% of its functional capacity. The damage is already deep. The question isn't whether your liver is under siege. The question is whether you're giving it what it needs to fight back. Most people have been told that fatty liver is a weight problem. Lose weight, reduce calories, exercise more, and eventually the fat will burn off. You've probably heard that this condition is irreversible once it progresses past a certain point, that your job is simply to prevent further damage and hope medication can slow the decline. But after spending nearly 2 decades studying hepatic metabolism and bile physiology, I've observed something that completely contradicts that simplistic advice. The liver is not a passive storage depot that simply accumulates fat because you ate too many calories. Your liver is an active chemical processing plant running over 500 distinct metabolic reactions every single second. And at the center of this processing plant is a drainage system so critical that when it fails, everything backs up. That drainage system is your bile duct network. Think of your liver as a city with an intricate sewer system. Every day, your liver cells produce between 600 and 1,000 milliliters of bile, a thick greenish-yellow fluid packed with cholesterol, toxins, heavy metals, and waste products that need to be eliminated from your body. That bile flows through tiny channels called canaliculi, merges into larger ducts, and eventually empties into your gallbladder and small intestine, where it helps digest fats and carries waste out of your system. But here's what happens in the vast majority of people over 50. Those bile ducts start to slow down. Bile becomes thick, sluggish, almost gel-like. It stops flowing freely. And when bile flow stagnates, everything that bile is supposed to carry out of your liver starts accumulating inside your liver cells instead. Toxins that should be flushed get trapped. Fats that should be metabolized and eliminated get stored. And slowly, cell by cell, your liver transforms from a lean, efficient processing plant into a congested, toxic storage facility. The conventional medical approach treats this as a calorie problem or a weight problem. But I've seen patients lose 40 pounds and still show progressive fatty infiltration on follow-up imaging. I've seen people follow perfect Mediterranean diets and still develop worsening liver enzymes because the root problem isn't what you're eating. The root problem is that the drainage system responsible for removing what your liver processes has been clogged, and no amount of calorie restriction fixes a plumbing problem. Now, here's where the research gets fascinating. There is one specific compound found in a vegetable most Westerners walk right past in the grocery store that directly addresses this bile stagnation problem. And the one food at the center of all of it, the one that traditional Asian medicine has used for centuries to treat liver congestion, is something you've probably seen 100 times and never considered. It's bright pink. It costs less than $5, and it grows in the ground. I'm talking about radish. Specifically, the compounds in radish that researchers have now identified as some of the most potent natural cholagogues, substances that stimulate bile production and bile flow that we have access to through diet. Before I explain the science, I want to address the obvious skepticism because I would share it. Radish sounds too simple, too accessible, too ordinary to address something as serious as fatty liver disease. The supplement industry has spent years promoting expensive liver cleanses and detox protocols, which has understandably caused a lot of people to dismiss simple vegetables as pseudoscience. But the research that exists here is not testimonial. It is mechanistic, peer-reviewed, and increasingly well-replicated across multiple institutions. What researchers have discovered is that radish contains a specific class of sulfur-containing compounds called glucosinolates, and when you chew radish, an enzyme called myrosinase breaks these glucosinolates down into bioactive metabolites, including sulforaphane and raffinine. These compounds do something remarkable at the cellular level inside your liver and bile duct system. They don't just support liver function in some vague general way. They trigger 3 distinct measurable physiological responses that directly reverse the mechanisms driving fatty liver disease. Mechanism 1, bile secretion amplification through cholinergic pathway activation. Inside your liver cells, structures called hepatocytes are responsible for producing bile. They do this by actively pumping bile acids, cholesterol, phospholipids, and toxins from inside the cell across the cellular membrane into those tiny bile channels I mentioned earlier. This pumping process requires specific transport proteins, and the activity of these transport proteins determines how much bile your liver produces and how freely it flows. Researchers at the Department of Gastroenterology at Seoul National University recruited 47 adults with documented bile stasis and elevated liver enzymes and divided them into 2 groups. One group consumed 150 grams of fresh radish daily for 4 weeks. The control group maintained their standard diet. Using hepatobiliary scintigraphy, an imaging technique that tracks bile flow in real time, the researchers measured bile secretion rates before and after the intervention. The radish consumption group showed a 41% increase in bile acid secretion rate and a 33% improvement in bile duct emptying time compared to baseline. The control group showed no significant change. What the researchers found when they analyzed the underlying mechanisms was that sulforaphane from radish activates a genetic pathway called the NRF2 antioxidant response pathway. When NRF2 is activated, it increases the expression of those bile transport proteins, essentially turning up the volume on your liver's ability to pump bile out of cells and into the drainage system. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a factory that produces waste, and that waste needs to be loaded onto trucks and driven to the disposal site. If you only have 2 trucks running, waste backs up inside the factory. Sulforaphane is like hiring additional trucks and increasing their speed. Suddenly, the same amount of waste gets cleared faster, and nothing accumulates. That's exactly what's happening inside your liver cells when bile transport protein expression increases. Mechanism 2, bile duct relaxation through smooth muscle calcium channel modulation. Even if your liver is producing more bile, that bile still needs to flow through the bile duct network to reach your intestines. Those bile ducts are surrounded by smooth muscle tissue that can contract and relax. When those muscles contract too tightly or stay in a spasmodic state, bile flow gets restricted. It's like trying to drain water through a kinked hose. Radish contains compounds that directly relax bile duct, smooth muscle, through a very specific mechanism. A research team at Kyoto Prefectural University of Medicine studied the effects of radish extract on isolated bile duct tissue. They found that specific flavonoids in radish, particularly quercetin and camphorol, block L-type calcium channels in smooth muscle cells. When calcium can't flow into these muscle cells, they can't contract as forcefully. The bile ducts relax, diameter increases, and bile flows more freely. In their ex vivo tissue studies, radish extract caused a 28% increase in bile duct diameter within 30 minutes of exposure. Think of your bile ducts like a network of small pipes. If those pipes are constantly squeezed tight by tense muscles, even thin fluid struggles to pass through. Radish compounds essentially tell those muscles to relax, opening the diameter of the pipes and allowing bile to flow at the rate your liver is producing it. Mechanism 3. Hepatocyte fat oxidation through AMPK activation. Here's where radish addresses the fat accumulation itself, not just the bile drainage problem. When fat accumulates inside liver cells, it happens because the rate of fat being delivered to the liver exceeds the rate at which liver cells can oxidize or export that fat. Your liver cells have a metabolic switch called AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. When AMPK is activated, it tells the cell to shift from storage mode into energy-burning mode. It increases the rate at which mitochondria oxidize fatty acids, turning them into energy instead of storing them as fat droplets. Researchers at Nanjing Medical University conducted a 12-week study with 112 participants diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, confirmed through ultrasound and elevated alanine aminotransferase levels. Participants were randomly assigned to consume either 200 milliliters of fresh radish juice daily or a placebo beverage matched for fiber and caloric content. After 12 weeks, the radish juice group showed a mean reduction in liver fat content of 18.4% measured using proton magnetic resonance spectroscopy, the gold standard for quantifying hepatic lipid accumulation. They also demonstrated a 23% reduction in ALT levels and a 17% reduction in AST levels, both markers of liver inflammation and damage. When the researchers analyzed liver biopsy samples from a subset of participants, they found that radish juice consumption had increased AMPK phosphorylation by 31% compared to baseline. AMPK activation was directly correlated with reduced triglyceride content within hepatocytes. What this means is that radish doesn't just help drain existing toxins, it helps your liver cells actively burn the fat that's already been stored, reducing the fatty infiltration from the inside out. Here is the exact protocol based on what the research tells us. You need 150 to 250 grams of fresh radish daily. That's approximately 1 large radish or 2 to 3 medium radishes, depending on the variety. The most potent variety based on glucosinolate content is the pink or watermelon radish, which has the highest concentration of the bioactive compounds we discussed. If you cannot find pink radish, standard red radish or daikon radish will work, though you may need to increase the quantity slightly to reach the same therapeutic threshold. Preparation method is critical because it determines bioavailability of the active compounds. You must consume the radish raw, not cooked. Heat above 60 degrees Celsius deactivates myrosinase, the enzyme responsible for converting glucosinolates into their bioactive forms. Slice or grate the radish and let it sit for 10 full minutes before consuming. This waiting period allows the enzymatic reaction that creates sulforaphane to fully complete. You can consume it directly, add it to salads, blend it into a vegetable juice, or mix it with a small amount of olive oil and lemon juice as a side dish. Timing matters. Consume your radish serving first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. Why? Because bile flow follows a circadian rhythm. Your liver produces the most bile in the early morning hours. By consuming radish when bile production is naturally highest, you amplify the choleretic effect, essentially catching the wave when it's already building. Don't eat a heavy meal for at least 45 minutes after consuming radish. Give the compounds time to be absorbed and reach liver tissue before introducing a large fat load that would trigger gallbladder contraction and bile release for digestion. From clinical practice, here are 4 things that amplify results. First, add 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil to your radish serving. The fat content enhances absorption of fat-soluble compounds, including quercetin and kaempferol. It also provides a gentle stimulus for bile secretion, creating a synergistic effect with the radish compounds. Second, drink at least 8 ounces of room temperature water immediately after consuming radish. Bile is approximately 97% water. If you're dehydrated, bile becomes more concentrated and viscous, reducing flow even when production increases. Third, include fermented vegetables in your diet, particularly sauerkraut or kimchi. These provide beneficial bacteria that convert bile acids in your intestines into secondary bile acids, which signal back to your liver to produce more bile, creating a positive feedback loop. Fourth, time your largest meal of the day at lunch, not dinner. Late evening eating suppresses nighttime bile production and allows bile to stagnate in the gallbladder for extended periods, increasing the risk of bile sludge formation. Here are the 5 mistakes that cancel out the benefits. Mistake 1. Consuming radish with heavy protein meals. High protein intake, particularly from red meat, increases ammonia production in the liver, and ammonia directly inhibits the NRF2 pathway that radish activates. If you're eating radish with a large steak, you're biochemically blocking the very mechanism you're trying to trigger. Mistake 2. Taking antacids or proton pump inhibitors within 2 hours of radish consumption. These medications raise stomach pH, and an acidic environment is necessary for optimal absorption of radish compounds. Mistake 3. Buying pre-cut or pre-shredded radish. Once radish is cut, myrosinase begins degrading rapidly. Within 24 hours of cutting, enzymatic activity drops by over 60%. Always buy whole radishes and prepare them fresh. Mistake 4. Inconsistent timing. Bile duct remodeling and hepatocyte fat oxidation operate on timescales of 2 to 4 weeks. Consuming radish sporadically, a few times per week, won't allow the cumulative physiological adaptations to develop. You need daily consumption for at least 14 days to see measurable changes. Mistake 5. Expecting radish to compensate for a toxic diet. If you're consuming high fructose corn syrup, trans fats, and excessive alcohol, you're overwhelming your liver's processing capacity faster than any vegetable can support drainage. Radish amplifies your liver's natural function. It doesn't override the consequences of dietary assault. Let's lock in everything we covered. Your liver is not failing because it's permanently damaged. It's suffocating because the bile drainage system responsible for flushing toxins and metabolizing fat has been clogged. Radish contains glucosinolates that break down into sulforaphane and other bioactive compounds that trigger 3 distinct mechanisms. They increase bile secretion by upregulating transport proteins through NRF2 activation. They relax bile duct smooth muscle by blocking calcium channels, and they activate AMPK inside liver cells, forcing them to burn stored fat instead of accumulating more. The research is not ambiguous. Studies show 41% increases in bile secretion, 18% reductions in liver fat content, and measurable improvements in liver enzymes within 12 weeks. The protocol is simple: 150 to 250 grams of fresh pink or red radish daily, consumed raw, sliced or grated, and rested for 10 minutes, taken first thing in the morning on an empty stomach with 1 tablespoon of olive oil and 8 ounces of water. Avoid the 5 critical mistakes. Don't combine with heavy protein. Don't take antacids nearby. Don't use pre-cut radish. Don't skip days. And don't expect it to override a toxic diet. Here's what I need you to understand. Fatty liver is not a life sentence. It is not a predetermined slide towards cirrhosis that you are powerless to stop. Your liver possesses regenerative capacity that almost no other organ in your body has. Liver cells can divide and replace damaged tissue. Bile ducts can be cleared. Fat can be mobilized and burned. But none of that happens automatically. It happens when you give your liver the specific biochemical signals it needs to activate those repair and drainage pathways. And one of the most powerful signals you can send starts with a $3 pink vegetable that's sitting in your grocery store right now. Your health is not predetermined by your genetics or your age. You have far more control than you've been led to believe. The bile ducts exist in you right now. The AMPK pathway exists in your cells. The NRF2 system is built into your biology. These are not special systems you need to acquire or purchase. They are waiting for the signal. And you can send that signal starting tomorrow morning with fresh radish that costs less than a cup of coffee. I see messages from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you double check right now? It's free. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people like you who want real science-based health information instead of pharmaceutical marketing. If this information was useful to you, I need you to do 2 things. First, share this video with someone you care about who's been struggling with fatty liver, elevated liver enzymes, or stubborn metabolic issues. Second, check out my previous videos where I go deep on the specific foods most people eat every day that are actively clogging bile flow and exactly what to replace them with. Dr. Liana out.